hey, thanks for logging on and talking about. They want me to talk to you about your podcast that I believe it ended at the tail end of last year, called what, Cherry Picks?
And so, okay, so the podcast is called CherryPop.
Oh, CherryPop, that's right.
Yes, and our company's name is Cherry Picks, and basically the overall mission of Cherry Picks as a whole is to kind of be the voice of the underrepresented in the film and television industry. And so we made it our business to collect reviews from non-binary and female critics. So, they kind of call us the female Rotten Tomatoes, which is just, it is what it is. But I think it's so much more than that. And so all the content that we put forward and we create, that's our core mission. So we started this podcast called CherryPop, which had its first season, finished about the tail end of last year, like you said. And that season was all about women and sex on screen, which when you hear the word sex, it seems like this kind of, like R-rated word, intimidating word. When a lot of folks hear the word sex, they think of, traditional heterosexual intercourse. However, for us, it means so much more than that. We think that the way that we view ourselves, a lot of it is a lot of unlearning we have to do from what has been portrayed from film and television and what has been kind of trickled down from the patriarchal society that we live in, and kind of unlearning what that word means to us and kind of taking back our sexuality, and sort of just unlearning a lot of that stuff.
Are you trying to demystify the idea of sex on screen, or you're just trying to basically provide a different perspective?
I think we're trying to provide a different perspective. And I think a lot of what the first season did was dismantle what a lot of these words mean. For example, we had a whole episode dedicated to virginity, and what even is virginity, and we came to the conclusion that virginity is whatever you want it to be. For some folks, virginity means, losing it in a traditional sense. And some folks, it could mean the first kiss. It means sort of whatever it means to you. We kind of analyzed this concept through past examples from film and television, and kind of how, we start the podcast by saying that a lot of women, we get our first sort of sexual education from film and TV, right? Whether that's, for me, I had two older brothers, so it was a lot of sneaking behind the living room couch and kind of peeking and watching whether it's an R-rated movie and there happens to be a sex scene. And then usually, if this was, for me, this was in the 90s, and I'm probably seeing a sex scene depicted from the male gaze, from the male perspective, and the woman is acting a certain way, not to be too, TMI, but usually the woman, we love to call it the 3-stroke orgasm. She receives one of those, it makes sex seem like this easy, thing, and then cut to real life, and you realize that it's so much more complex and complicated, especially from a woman's perspective. So a lot of the first season was kind of looking at the history of film over the last 30 years and kind of picking out good examples of how, whether it's virginity was depicted, whether it was queer sex depicted on screen, whether it was sex depicted, with a woman 50 and plus, and kind of pointing out filmmakers that have really done their research and have taken the time to really learn whether they aren't a female, to learn about the female experience, sexual experience with our bodies, experience how, you know, being sexualized can cause a lot of trauma. Yeah, so it was really sort of just looking at it through that lens.
I find the fact that you've done a lot of extensive research, or I'm much more compelled to say, I'm amazed you've done so much research. How do you know so much about all these films? Because you don't cover, like, you don't choose like one or two films. You talk about a lot of different films.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's our, you know, with the first season, I was accompanied by my wonderful co-producer and co-host, Beyondra July. And I think we had such a wonderful chemistry and working relationship because we took it seriously. And I think that it's astonishing how many professionals, especially in the kind of film criticism, you know, industry, or whether it's a film host, don't do their research. But I think that's our duty. I think it's our duty that whenever we put out these opinions, to make sure that we have, you know, the stuff to back them up. And I think that's why I think that we take this podcast very seriously, because we want it to feel like a safe space to discuss these things, but we also want to be trusted. And I think a lot of when you're talking about these sort of more delicate subjects, which again, the whole point is to make them not delicate anymore, but to normalize them. In order to do that, you have to build a trust. And I think you build trust by showing, hey, I'm putting in the effort, I put in the effort, and I've earned your trust.
So when you ladies do like a brainstorming session, let's say you choose a topic or something, you sit around, probably throw a bunch of movies out. Is it a bunch of familiar movies that everyone's already familiar with, or someone choose a movie and then you literally have to like find that movie and rewatch it yourself?
Yeah, I think, and I should just preface it by saying that the second season that we're about to launch has a different format, so we can get into that in a minute. But the way that we did it was kind of a mixture of everything you just said. A lot of films we wanted to touch upon some films that everyone would be familiar with, so we could kind of dissect them together. And then we also wanted to introduce our audience to films that they probably hadn't heard of before. And we would sort of trade off. My Beyondra would come to me and say, I really want to talk about this film. And if I hadn't seen it, then that, you know, I watched it. It's a lot of watching. I've already watched, like today, I've already watched like 3 movies. But what we're doing a little different in the second season is beyond my co-host Beyondra couldn't join me this time around, and I wanted to make sure that we created a different format so we could always revisit the first format, since it was really fun and important. But this time around, we're doing a more discussion-based podcast. So we're not doing as many film recommendations. However, we're really building it around topics, and we're having each episode will have a different co-host, and that co-host will basically come to me and say, I really want to talk about blank. I really want to talk about sort of nudity in film, or I want to talk about, you know, we have a wonderful co-host this season, Cam, who's a country music star. And she really wanted to talk about kind of how she had to navigate for herself, how she sort of wanted to be, you know, she felt like when she went into the business that she was like, I have to make a conscious effort to either not be sexualized or be sexualized. And, you know, we talked a lot about that. And so it's more discussion based, which is really fun. It obviously takes a little bit of a workload off my plate because I'm not watching as many movies, because I watch movies for the other stuff I do for Cherry Picks. So this has been really fun because it just feels like gosh, it's just wonderful to have these conversations that we could just go on and on with these amazing, talented, intelligent women that clearly want to get these, get this stuff off their chest and to talk about it because they think it's important to talk about.
It's funny because just like yourself, I end up watching a lot of movies, probably like two to four to five, movies a day, and the funniest thing is when a sex scene comes on, I just fast forward.
Oh my God, you do! I rewind it and I watch it again.
Well, from a guy's perspective, I know how men actually think about it, but if after watching thousands of these things, it's pretty much the same. So
that's so interesting you say that, because the whole point that we're trying to kind of say with the podcast is that we like to call them intimate scenes, right? And that in really good movies, intimacy moves the story forward. Mm-hmm. So an intimate scene can really show us so much about the characters. It has that ability. Because two people or three or one, this could be a self-pleasure scene. This could be a menage, whatever. But traditionally, we're talking about two people coming together. And when done in sort of an authentic way, it can really show each character's vulnerabilities, can really show, can give context to the film. I just watched a beautiful film called Test Pattern that's out on virtual cinemas right now. And the intimacy scene, it's so authentic and beautiful. It almost feels like you're a fly on the wall and that you shouldn't be there because it's so intimate. And those are the best scenes to me. But a lot of the times, unfortunately, they end up being the type of scenes where you could just fast forward them because it's literally just gratuitous.
Yeah.
So it's like we have this gold that we could work with. And it's really, I think, in If Beale Street Could Talk, it's a great example of a sex scene that is so intimate. You feel like as an audience member that you shouldn't even be watching. The silence of the scene speaks volumes about the way that he sort of approaches her, the way that he kind of, it shows so much about their relationship. And I think Barry did his homework. He talked to his partner, Lulu, the great filmmaker, about it for a female perspective. And you can tell he took care. He was like, this is important to show. And it feels like an actual scene rather than like a bump and grind, get it over with kind of thing. Yeah.
I think I agree. I think a lot of sex scenes today just makes us detached from the film and just have fast forward through a lot of these things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're really missing that kind of intimacy. We get it a lot, I think, in international films. We get the French are so great at intimacy scenes. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're kind of learning in American cinema why they're so important, but it's like we have a lot to learn.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's like one of the things why certain films, when they do something different, it becomes more attractive. Like I think it was Swallow was one of them that totally took me off guard. There's a movie that's coming out soon, Jumbo, which is which that scene was just way out there that you just can't help to watch. I'm sure you actually seen it. I think that was a Sundance film.
I haven't seen Jumbo yet. I haven't seen that. I'll have to look out for that.
Yeah, that's based off a true story about a woman who falls in love with an amusement park ride.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I think that's coming out in a couple of weeks. So you should. You could probably analyze that intimacy. for yourself. Now, I do have a question. Is why the podcast format? Because when people talk about sex, people like to visualize it, but in this case, they can't visualize it because they're actually listening to you. So we would have to use our imaginations or something.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that, gosh, that's a really interesting question. I think that, we have a lot of other, I host this series called Cherry Chat on IG Live. That's an interview show. And we have some other initiatives going on. And I think when we just started talking about the podcast space, what we all sort of came to the conclusion that what we love about podcasts is kind of the idea of being able to sort of analyze, being able to, like reading a good book, allowing your sort of imagination to take over, and not having that kind of visual reference. So I think that when the best podcast, I think that's why everyone loves a good murder podcast and a good crime podcast. It's like we like these tantalizing subjects so we can kind of allow our imagination to go wild. And I think that, again, like with the second season, we're talking about sex, but we're also talking about sort of just what it means to kind of be a woman when we, or a female identifying person sort of in the entertainment space. And being sexualized or being put in a box has a lot to do with that. But we also talk about kind of the misrepresentations and representations of beauty and, just sort of how we view ourselves. And like I said in the beginning, it's a lot of unlearning. So I think with the more discussion-based podcast format, I think the podcast format allows you as a listener to really feel like you're right there with us having this discussion, whether you're in your car or you're at home. I think that there is something that's very intimate about a podcast. Whether you're listening to on your headphones, you feel like you're very much in it with us. So, sorry, long-winded answer, but
no, it's all good. In the first season, you always end with an interview. Are you still going to do that with the second season, or your interview subject is going to be the co-host?
No, that's what's kind of cool is that, so the format for this season is that myself and the co-host, we get into the meaty discussion for the first part, and then the two of us together interview a guest for the second part. So, which is really cool. And so what I love about that as well is that I've been introducing two amazing women together that may not have met before, that may, know each other's work or look up to each other or not be familiar with each other. And I think another big part of what CherryPix does as a brand is that we like, at the end of the day, it's all about supporting women. It's all about uplifting women and female voices. So I try to integrate that into the podcast by introducing two women, whether they're one's from the music industry and one's a filmmaker, or whether they're both from, film. It's a fun moment for me to be able to do that.
Now, your first season ended with just 6 episodes. Are you going to basically try to push it a little bit further on the second season?
Yeah, I think we are. We're in the thick of it right now. I've done 3 episodes so far under my belt that are not yet in the hands of our lovely editors, but the goal is to extend this season for sure. We want it to be an ongoing thing. That's our hope. I think that's always everyone's hope to, because there's just so much to talk about. And yeah, it's so funny. It's like I allot 30 minutes for the co-host time and then 30 minutes for the interview time. And we always end up going over because it's just so much to talk about. And when women get together, It's like, well, we just love to talk.
Oh, that's why the podcast format is perfect.
Exactly.
So when are you hoping that the second season would actually premiere?
We're hoping to launch in April, actually, next month. That's our hope. So yeah, so that's the hope for it. Like everything in this business, it can change. But that's the plan right now, to launch in April.
Now you are obviously very much involved with CherryPix as an organization. What other projects that you are involved with CherryPix besides this podcast?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we have our IG live series Cherry Chat, which is done through Instagram Live, which has been really interesting. That is an interview show where we, highlight women in the industry, whether they're promoting a project or they just want to talk about their experience, their opinions. Very much like the podcast, it's all about creating a safe space where at the end of the day, it's just two people connecting and talking about their love for film, how film and television have shaped them personally and professionally. And that kind of was birthed out of the pandemic, and this idea of how do we connect with each other and share our love for film and television, and still connect during this time. And it's become pretty popular, and we have about 3 to 4 cherry chats a week. And we've done, I think, like 150 interviews, cherry chats at this point, which is really fun. We also do a lot of screenings. We do panels. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff with South by Southwest in a few weeks. And yeah, we're a small team, but we're a mighty team, and we just like to get our hands in everything and just spread our message wherever we can. So yeah, we also have wonderful editorial. We do a lot of editorial interviews. We have a wonderful editorial team that handles that. And yeah,
I am so amazed at the amount of work. 150 plus interviews. That's crazy, and we're only talking about in a few months, right?
Yeah, I'm tired. Oh, that's I gotta get my coffee, just to keep me going. But I love it. It's like, I think though, when you you know what I mean? It's like you feed off of the passion, and you feed off of it energizes me, and I think it energizes the team, knowing that what we're doing is, like I said, it's to us, it feels important. It feels necessary, and there's nothing better than, I think, uplifting and promoting just amazing, talented women in the industry. And I think that, like, the numbers don't lie. Like, yes, it's getting better, but we still have a lot of work to do. So it's like, we got to keep doing that work and do whatever we can to keep that moving.
Well, excellent. Well, I'm glad you're keeping busy. I would have asked you what's keeping you creative and sane during the pandemic, but obviously this is. So I'm glad you actually brought it. I'm glad that you're keeping sane and creative with CherryPix and CherryPop. For myself, just FYI, you just by interviewing you since January, I think I just went over 150.
So how's that going for you? Are you?
I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I have to talk to 3 to 5 people a day via Zoom all day. And some people said, what's keeping you sane? I'm like, I don't get to meet anybody, but I get to meet people like all the time via Zoom. So
it is really interesting, isn't it? I think that, like, that's why I think for me, I think what has been helpful is jumping from the different formats a day.
Yeah.
So like doing a Zoom interview, doing a podcast, doing an IGT live, and I'm constantly also, this is sort of I'm in my podcast room right now because of the sound quality is the best
Yeah.
in the room, but then I jump in a different room for my live. So I do feel like I get that mix up, which I think has been helpful.
Wow.
I
Well,
think that's been helpful.
well, Meg, hey, thank you very much for speaking with us. When your second season becomes live, let's do this again.
Yes, I love this. This was so lovely. Thanks for starting my morning off right. And, keep sane, keep safe. And thanks so much for having us and letting us talk about Cherry Picks and CherryPop. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. I'm sure we're going to talk about it again, and we'll get into specifics this time around.
I love it. All right. Well, you have a good day.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye now.